Good afternoon, ALSD, to our panelists and audience on the West Coast. Good morning. Thank you for taking some time with the ALSD today. My name is Jared Frank, publisher at the ALSD, and welcome to today's webinar. I personally am really excited and just enthusiastic about this specific content. First of all, I'm a curious person. I like to learn new things, and I know that most of you in the audience are the exact same way. So you'll definitely enjoy today's content. But I'm excited because we're starting to talk a lot less about topics like refunds, rollovers, and starting to talk a lot more about those topics that are helping to relaunch this industry and recoup, or at least begin to recoup, a year's worth of lost revenue and return fans to facilities and revenues to our owners' pockets. Before we're going to be successful in doing those things, though, we need to build trust in our communities and build confidence in our communities and demonstrate to them that our buildings are safe and they're clean. And that's what we're going to try to illustrate for you today. Going to have a great discussion on the cost effectiveness, the time efficiency associated with various safety, sanitization, operational protocols, at times supported by UVC technology. And that discussion will be driven by this panel that brings a diverse range of expertise. So let's meet them. I'll ask each of you gentlemen to please introduce yourselves, tell us the organization that you represent, and just a little bit about how you look at the topic, how you're approaching today's topic. Alex, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, good morning and good afternoon to those that are obviously on the opposite end of the world or the coast. I just want to take a moment to recognize, obviously this has been a very challenging time, but to your point, Jared, that there is light at the tunnel. We are gaining some momentum, and it's been wonderful to see those strides. But nonetheless, I know that many of us have either been personally affected, either directly or indirectly through our staff or through our family, with what's happened in the world. And so my heart goes out to everybody, and we still have to, remain vigilant. But with that said, wish everyone a healthy and happy, 2021. Alex Rodrigo, Senior Vice President with the Sacramento Kings and General Manager of the Golden One Center here in Sacramento. We also own and operate an old arena, which we'll talk about today as well, which is the old Sleep Train Arena, the former home of the Sacramento Kings. But I'm excited to share. We really haven't gone public with many of our efforts, so this is a good opportunity for me to, behind the scenes, been reaching out and staying connected in the industry. I think that's the power of our community, and I think the importance of not only remaining visible, but sharing best practices, and also maybe some of the mistakes or some of the disinformation or information that we have heard or experienced ourselves. So just wanted to say thank you and look forward to doing a deeper dive.
Yeah, we're obviously excited and looking forward to that deeper dive. Eli, tell us who you are, bud.
Thank you for having me, guys. My name is Eli Harris. I spent my last 10 years over in mainland China. I started out in foreign service, did a couple Fulbrights in Beijing. Then I got involved in hardware manufacturing, worked for a drone company called DJI. And then I, 6 years ago, built my first manufacturing business, manufacturing large, high-capacity batteries. And I was fortunate and sold that company last year. Came back to the States and recently launched a new venture together with Dr. Wade called R0. And what we're doing is taking hospital-grade disinfection technologies and protocols and democratizing access and taking these systems outside of the hospital environment into more dynamic commercial environments, keep folks safe in a post-COVID world. And I think part of it is keeping people safe, and part of it is really articulating what you're doing and the changes that you're making. So we're trying to solve both those issues of safety, but also trust.
And Dr. Wade, how are you looking at this topic today? Can I ask you to come off mute, Dr. Wade?
My name is Richard Wade. I spent 40 years working in infectious disease. Really, a lot of focus in that 40 years has been on disinfection. I've been in academic and in industry over that time. When COVID struck, I've been very busy working with a number of different clients around the world of how to reduce risk with infectious disease, specifically COVID. And it came to be looking at what we could bring to the table with advanced technology, which would help clients reduce risk. And that brought me together with Eli and Ben and Grant to form R0 to bring this technology to the table to help all of us.
Thank you, gentlemen. And to the audience, would encourage your questions throughout today's content. How this is going to work today is I'm going to start by having a conversation and taking that deeper dive with Alex. As he mentioned, we do have a slide deck prepared, but we don't plan on presenting that information to you. We're going to speak to that information. Really, we want to speak with you. So please do submit your questions and we'll try to address those as they come in. I have a lengthy bullpen of my own questions that I'm excited to ask. So looking forward to the learning process here today. Alex, let's get this going. I know that myself and probably yourself and those in the audience, we don't like dwelling on what happened in 2020, but I do think it's valuable in setting that foundation, letting the audience know how you and the Golden One Center and the Sacramento Kings arrived at the point that you are. So can you speak to some of those significant ways dating back to March 2020 that the COVID-19 pandemic has touched your team, your organization, your building, and how you've had to adjust?
Yeah, happy to. And this discussion really forced me to look back in great detail. So, and as you said, we've just been forging ahead, and every now and then you got to look back and realize, oh my gosh, what's happened. I'll be brief about this. March 11th, I mean, it's no surprise on national TV, minutes before tip-off, we canceled our game against the Pelicans because of a referee that had worked the Utah Jazz game several days prior to that. That happened during the security briefing in the moment. Wasn't scripted, and it just happened to be by chance. And obviously we know that March 12th, the NBA had already announced that night on the 11th that they were going to cancel the season. So you can imagine it's like a scene in a movie where all of a sudden it triggers a series of events, notifications, and for the lack of a better word, a lot of confusion, chaos, anxiety, and what ifs, and phones are ringing off the hooks, and what are you going to do and how are you going to manage this? And then you still had this, the boogeyman in the building, where what are you going to do in that locker room now and how are you going to treat this? And it's like a scene out of a movie, whether it be Alien or, Stranger Things on Netflix, where there's something behind this door that's growing, and if you open it, it's going to get out and get us. But and I know I say that, with a little humor, but it really was a very tense 24 hours of trying to figure out, what do you do? Shortly within days, we're obviously talking to healthcare providers, a lot of the local officials and government agencies, and folks like Dr. Wade out there that advise us, intelligently and calmly on how to manage the situation. But within a week, we were transitioning to work with the governor's office and converting the old Sleep Train Arena, the former home of the Sacramento Kings, into a surge hospital. And that really thrust us into the mix, because now I'm coordinating meetings with the Army Corps of Engineers, looking at the infrastructure of a 185-acre site, an old arena, a practice facility that's a bit more modern and state-of-the-art, and really evaluating all systems. So now we're starting to get some insight into the medical space and how you need to manage, not only the surface, but the air, the ingress, egress, security protocols, technology associated with all those ecosystems. And so it's a huge joint service operation with California Office of Emergency Service, CDPH, CAL FIRE, and on and on and on. And that really, I never thought I'd be thrust back into my former career in the military, 8 years in EOD. In crisis management. So I felt like I was, built for the moment and able to really utilize those connections to then continue our efforts. So that happened within weeks. Within a month or so, we've got an erect surge hospital. And then, given the limited resources in the region, the Kings, we as an organization offered to provide wraparound services, not to monetize, but to just, pass through expenses to provide the engineering support, the housekeeping, the medical cleaning, all the waste management. I mean, there's a long laundry list of the things that we've been involved with. We've been state certified to provide, staff and patient food, which originates out of our kitchens here at Golden One Center. Currently still in that posture, 7 days a week, 2 meals a day, or 3 meals a day with, two deliveries. And so we've really been working hand in hand with the frontline workers, the executive teams, all the medical professionals, and really leading by science, right? Experience and a proven environment. And so that really has benefited us quite a bit, and not just on the technical aspect, right? I believe science and knowledge should always lead first, but then I'm building a culture that's supported, because you're working with a culture that's already been established, and taking those best practices and building awareness and building a community that then translates into us working with others across the aisle and providing a calm and direct and informed, plan. So I could go deeper, obviously limited on time here, and always happy to provide more detail at a later date. But, we were incorporating technologies like Bloom Energy, always on, resilient, sustainable, cost-effective electricity, which is fuel cell technology, at the same time that we're looking at, systems that mitigate, UVC light technology and all the different array of filtration. And so, like I said, there's just a wealth of knowledge, not all doable, but we were getting into this arena now, with, for the lack of a better word, of professionals in the industry that we could share and understand, how do you operate in this environment? How do you scale accordingly to what would be a surge hospital or maybe a permanent facility, short-term versus long-term strategies, costs, so on and so on.
Well, when I mentioned to the audience in the introduction that these panelists brought a certain level of expertise, you just validated that for me, Alex, so thank you. Let's talk about the present day activity in your building, but then also the present status of your reopening plan, looking out into the rest of 2021. And I'm not just talking about Kings basketball there, because you're a multi-purpose facility and you have an entire events schedule that you're trying to bring back into your building. So present day activity and present status of your reopening plan, thinking out to the end of 2021.
Yeah, currently, going back out to sleep train, we're still in the surge hospital mode. We have patients out there and we're still continuing operations. And so we have a dedicated staff of about 100 professionals working to support those efforts. And we're starting to see the numbers come down. And so we believe that'll most likely phase by March or April. But then we will pivot to potentially becoming one of the mega sites, one of two that we've already committed to. So that investment will continue to pay forward in the community. Coming back to Golden One Center, a couple of the things that we immediately did during the spring and summer as we were building plans with the NBA was, getting the team back into the bubble for the 1920 season in preparation for Orlando. And that was really the first step back into the facility, other than the essential workforce that was in the building, working on some high tech. We finalized a TrueView 360 camera project. And so one of the things that is important to understand is that we were very careful, thoughtful about not stopping what were maybe some of the more strategic efforts for when we reopen. And so how do you do that carefully while still reducing your workforce, to essential workforce, and learning to coexist? Because it wasn't just a complete stop. We phased down, but we didn't stop. And so shortly after that, so we get the team out to Orlando. And then, not in any particular order, but we've opened up drive-through flu shot clinics. We had the voting center for the presidential election, 11 days in our grand entrance inside the building with no incidents. We started now the 2021 season. Full practice. For those that are not aware, the Golden One Center, the arena itself has a practice facility built into it. It's incorporated into our ecosystem, roughly about 51,000 square feet with 2 parking garages attached. So it's literally all self-contained. We did a state legislators swearing in ceremony in December for all the legislators that were coming on board and had just been voted in. So we were working hand in hand in the community with the state and the county and city officials. We opened an outdoor dining experience called Al Fresco, which, if you think of like the Italian, French, Parisian streets, of tables and chairs and lamps, and doing the cleaning protocols, the technology, all the different things to service, our community during that time while you still could. And then, we hosted a series of other virtual events. We looked at the building as an opportunity of not just an arena, but a studio lot. And on this studio lot, there are all these sets. And in those sets, socially distanced and with the right protocols, you could produce content to stay connected. And so we did that. And then moving forward, as many of our folks in entertainment and programming have seen, the calendar continues to flip. It's like a deck in a casino that keeps continue getting reshuffled. But, the beauty is that we've seen, well over 60 events confirmed. in our books from the end of July through December 31st. A good handful of those 20 plus are concerts, which we're seeing still some movement now into probably 2022. But we've been building our plan step by step. My hat off to those that are on the call today that have already opened up to fans. We have not had to experience that. We have had people in our building. We've been able to move. We are currently protecting a good large number of people. For those that don't know, it's roughly about 350 people to execute a game day environment with broadcast, press, and media, and both home and visiting, and all the support teams that are needed. But and then on our books is confirmed our participation to host 2 mega vaccine sites if and when the time is called. So a pretty busy calendar. We're seeing a lot of expressed interest, and more importantly, because of our involvement within the community, we're also seeing both state and city agencies wanting to use the arena as our town hall, which was always a word that we would use, and now it's really become that. As we've seen in the swearing in ceremonies and some of the other public events, we have the ability to host a large number of people socially distanced in a very clean and healthy environment with all the protocols in place. So we've seen traction in that space as well.
You've alluded to a couple of these groups, but I think they're worth a call out. And we talk a lot about the fan experience, and rightly so, but there are so many other constituent parts to this. None of them less important than the next. I'm talking about players, talking about staff, the artists, the performers, the promoters. I imagine they're coming to you with some questions and some concerns related to your protocols. What are some of those common questions and concerns, and how do your protocols meet them?
Yeah, great question. Testing is one of the first ones out of the gate, as we're all trying to make, sense of that. Not all buildings or organizations are built, in some instances, it can be cost prohibitive. But testing, of the most obvious ones are disinfecting and cleaning. What are you doing? What's the associated technology with that? Contact tracing, local, regional government support, the associated economics is are you passing those expenses on to us? and those are the discussions that are obviously need to take place. And then, probably one of the more important ones is the similarities or industry partnerships that are aligned with your efforts. In some cases, what we're going to see as much in our community is that they have one experience or one conversation in one city or state, and they may do something extremely well that maybe is not something that you're doing, or vice versa. So we've seen that being one of the bigger questions as well, is there consistency or continuity amongst all brands or buildings, and what's the unified message, and what's the over under on those things, and I think it's important also. I just want to highlight, not that I've experienced anything, but I think that's where we have to show strength as a community, that we're not downplaying someone's efforts, that we're not shooting holes in what they're doing. There are leaders in every category. Some are taking some, additional measures, some that we, as personally as a smaller market, may not be able to afford, but I certainly commend them on what they're doing. That can create, I wouldn't say tension, but it creates that, well, why aren't you? And shouldn't you be? And, we're all afraid of losing any more business, but I think we need to work together to really kind of iron out those differences, and then celebrate the things that we are doing collectively together that have been proven to work. So that's generally the discussion now. And I think the continued awareness and education, and being able to build a sense of community. Once again, you're going to hear me keep saying that, but it really is. This is something that's affected all of us. So there's no getting around that.
Well, you clearly have a holistic approach, and there's a number of arrows in your quiver. I do want to narrow in on UVC technology now and ask, when did that become a part of the conversation, and what made you a believer in that technology?
Well, working in the medical space, I mean, a couple of years ago, I'm not a savant, or I got lucky, but a couple of years ago, I decided to pivot. In my experience, I've been part of, new construction developments, billion-dollar projects. Shout out to the folks in St. Louis with the St. Louis Cardinals, and also to the St. Louis Blues, if anybody's on here. 2 organizations that I've worked with, both, one on a new construction, the other one, the transformation of a facility, bringing it from the late 80s or 90s into the future. And, And through all those experiences, building out locker rooms for a team, understanding what some of the medical requirements are, and maintaining an environment for them. But most importantly, working with the healthcare professionals, the scientists and the engineers, the general contractors and the specialists, the folks that specialize in energy and disinfecting and cleaning, and really just taking the playbook from the medical industry and seeing how much of that we could absorb and mimic and follow. And so 2 years ago, we made I made the decision to orient our engineering department in that direction by hiring people with, a vast experience in the medical space, both commissioning those buildings, also being part of new facilities and construction. So bringing that outside perspective into the building and taking that ownership was key. And certainly it was, we didn't see it coming, but it was an easy transition for us. And then, like I said, just working with all of the agencies that I mentioned earlier, working with that round table of professionals has been extremely important. That's what led us to this. This was an active conversation early on. It wasn't something that we could, at the time, afford, didn't understand much of it. A lot of the built-in inline systems seemed to be a bit cost prohibitive. It was more of a long-term investment in strategy. And so we didn't have or know at the time that we had the ability to ultimately pivot and find a cost-effective portable program that could pay dividends throughout the entire building and not just to one specific space or room.
When I first came across this case study and got excited about it, this is new to me. So I couldn't wrap my arms around, like, what does it look like? How does it work? So I think it might be helpful to launch some of the photos that we have prepared so people can see it. And Alex, if you would, just tell us where you're deploying it within your facilities. How many units do we have? Kind of just give us some of the quick hits of how you're leveraging UVC technology.
Yeah, so we're using this as our practice facilities, about 2 floors, about 51,000 square feet of a practice facility. The photos that you see here is inside of our basketball operations. We have our administration and offices and communal spaces up top. We have our medical and training and the basketball courts as well down below. So we're really focused on, those resources and assets, as well as then roughly about 150,000 square feet in the arena, which is attached and adjacent. So the path of travel is, taking an elevator and walking through a door. And then you're now into the main locker rooms, into both home visiting and all the additional spaces that go with that. And for those that have been, that are in the NBA, understand, the social distancing guidelines and the NBA's robust 382 point, protocol, which each protocol itself for point is pretty massive in itself. But we've had to spread out. And so we've taken over spaces that weren't traditionally part of the basketball operations or the game day environment and have converted them into additional space to create that greater separation and focused use. So we've been using it across, 200 and some thousand square feet. This has been helpful for us, that, and I think I'll let the R0 guys talk about, all the ins and outs, but, part of not only being cost effective, but the ability to be able to utilize this unit or units throughout a facility at your discretion, regardless of time of day, has really been probably one of the unique, key features that has allowed us to respond accordingly and pivot without having to be restricted to the square footage or to the 4 walls per se. We can move our protocols and our processes specific to those areas as needed when needed.
Sorry about that. I broke my first rule. Make sure you're off mute. Thanks, Alex. I do want to bring in Eli and Dr. Wade at this point. And I think we can actually, we can keep those slides going if that works for you guys in the back room. We don't necessarily need to speak directly to all of them, but they have such good information. I think it's worth keeping up. But I do want to start with Dr. Wade and simply ask, for anyone not familiar with what UVC light is exactly, maybe it's obvious, but maybe it's not to some people. So what is it and what makes it a proven technology?
Yeah, UVC light is a narrow spectrum of the overall light spectrum that we see. It's around 250 nanometers, and it is a wavelength which is particularly damaging to pathogenic organisms. It also burns the eyes, it'll burn the skin. That's why you can't use it when you're in presence of the arc system or the UV light in general. But it is very effective at destroying pathogenic organisms. It was one guy who invented it in the early 1900s, won the Nobel Prize to show how effective it was at disinfecting surfaces. It's been around for a long time, many, many years. It's been used to treat water, it's been used to treat wastewater, but that narrow spectrum of UV light is very effective at killing microorganisms in total.
And Eli, we saw the photos of the ARC device, but give us a little bit more information on what that device is, how it works, some of the risks, which Dr. Wade just alluded to. Discuss how those risks are addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to quickly just kind of zoom out in a little context as to why we built this device and how we optimized it. So these systems have been used since the 1940s in hospital rooms. Typically in the surgical theater where they're performing operations. And this largely came about in the 1940s with the measles outbreak. And it's now a $5 billion market in hospitals today. But what's really interesting is that these systems are value priced based on the cost savings of reducing infections in hospitals. So each incident of a hospital acquired infection, so if you go into a hospital for a small surgery and you leave with staph or something else, that's on average a $30,000 financial liability for the hospital. And because we've used these in hospitals since the 40s, there's enough data out there to show that hospitals that use these UVC light towers have 93% fewer infections than the hospitals that don't use them. So there's enough data out there to show that these manufacturers can say, hey, we're going to sell you these systems for north of $100,000 because if we prevent just a few of these infections over the lifetime of the device, then it pays for itself and there's a payback period. And there's enough data out there to show that this is in fact true. So it becomes a very logical purchase for the hospital to shell out more than six figures for these systems, when in reality, it's not rocket science. They're not that complex to build and they're not that complex operationally. So we went out and we raised $20 million, almost $20 million from the same fund as Tesla and SpaceX. And we designed the system and re-engineered it to take it outside of the hospital environment and offer it more affordably to more dynamic commercial environments. And the truth is the hardware is not that difficult. In 5 months with a good engineering team, we built a system that unequivocally, fundamentally outputs more light than any system being sold in the world today. And we're pricing it based off the bill of materials as opposed to extorting value from the healthcare system. So what this is I mean, it really is a light on wheels with a timer. It's that simple. I mean, you wheel into a space, you plug it in. There's 4 buttons. Our design target was a microwave. We said that anyone who can operate a microwave should be able to operate this system. We learned that a lot of janitorial crews are English second language, very high turnover. We wanted this to be very simple. So you wheel into a space, you plug it in, you press a button, and it runs a cycle. And this light disinfects all the air and all the surfaces at the time that it is run. We output a lot of light, which means very short cycle times. So in a 500 square foot room, if it's a bathroom or a small medical room, you can disinfect it in 3.5 minutes. 1,000 square foot room would be 7 minutes. 3,500 square feet would be less than 15 minutes. So it's very quick cycles. But as Dr. Wade said, this light is harmful to human skin and eyes. So we put in 360 degrees of infrared heat and motion sensors. And these have a 40-foot range, and they sense every 1/8 of a second. So if any person were to enter a space, that the device would automatically shut off, and it would tell you cycle paused. So there's actually no risk of human exposure. And because of that, this becomes actually a very safe technology to use, because unlike chemicals where you force an interaction between the janitor and the chemical, this is a system that operates when nobody is present.
Seemingly it is simple, and that's what the previous slide just reinforced, but is there any type of onboarding and training that you provide to your clients? And Alex, if you wouldn't mind on the other side of that, how are you onboarding and training your team to be successful with these devices? But Eli first.
So we are what's called a double bottom line company. We signed a pledge. I mean, one is we need to have some level of profit and sustainability as a company, but that second is social impact. So we actually manufacture wholly in the U.S. We manufacture in San Jose, California. All of our service is U.S. based, and we really are here to be partners. So any of our customers, we actually help you. We work with you and understand your janitorial SOPs, understand how many crew members you have, what your floor plans are, and we actually help you build a protocol. And we actually went on site and we trained the staff. So we do both Zoom trainings if you prefer, or we can actually come on site and do trainings for your ops staff, as well as your ABM team or GDI or whatever outsourced janitorial you use. We can conduct any number of trainings. But I mean, we're not trying to sell you a 74-pound paperweight. I mean, we want you using the system. Our credibility is only as good as your safety. So we really are here to be partners, and we work with your teams and understand your janitorial SOPs, your facilities. And what's actually really unique about our devices, and this is where we have a lot of our intellectual property, is we're the first company to embed a Verizon LTE chip. And what we can do with that is we can actually track who ran the device, which room they ran it, and what time they ran it. So for the first time, you actually have execution compliance and an audit trail around your janitorial staff. Because right now you send a crew in to spray, to wipe, but you don't actually know what surfaces they sprayed, what they wiped, how long they were in each room. Maybe they signed their initials on a log, but there's no objective audit. So with this system, you can actually see, okay, the bathroom and the locker room was turned over at 9 o'clock last night, but somehow the medical room was missed. So from a risk mitigation and a safety perspective, you actually have that audit trail. And then from a marketing perspective, you can actually show that reporting in real time to your players, to your staff, to your VIP suite holders, or to your community at large. So that reporting is dual purpose. It's one, to ensure compliance, and two, to build trust. And you can export that and cut that data by day, by month, by building, by room, by operator, and use that as a tool. And we can pre-program your floor plans into the device. So your operators just wheel this thing around and they just select the room. And then the device knows how big that room is, and it will run a cycle time calibrated to that room. So you don't even have to second guess and measure the room size and set the cycle time. So that's all part of the onboarding program that we've done with Alex and his team.
Yeah. Alex, gonna call a brief audible here, because the question that just emerged to me is, do you need more crews, less crews, the same number of crews? Did you have to completely rewrite your protocols, or did this seamlessly integrate into what you were already doing?
Seamless integration, no additional staff. And that was one of the attractive models. Part of this is, I'll go back to what Eli was saying in the initial question of the onboarding, much aligned with who we are, people first organization, but also tech centric and innovation leads. And they both coexist. So the support and the follow through has been, phenomenal in that sense. And I go back to partnerships and strategic alliances here, that we're all trying to pull in the same direction with limited staff or resources. And so this really blends into that programming that we have. It's friendly, user friendly, I should say, and the safeties that are built into it and a proven technology has gone, it's done wonders for our staff confidence and belief and their ability to be able to utilize the systems that they're now. Part of what I always say is that everybody should be involved in the decision-making process to some degree, get consensus and buy-in, and then the ramping up, the training, the onboarding, and the execution follows seamlessly because they bought into that initial. So as we were contemplating, partnering here with R0 and the ARC, we met with our frontline staff and talked to them about what were some of their concerns and needs and what did they hear in the industry. And we were able to kind of really just kind of bridge any gaps that were there. And we found, because of the work that we'd already been doing up north at the old arena in partnership with the city and the state, we had already gone a long way to bridging any, misinformation or talking points. But, the proof is in, you can tell people all day long what you're capable of doing, but then until you actually do it, this has been a very successful program for us. So to go back to the other question, No, we're working with the same staff. It's still a reduced workforce. It's part of their, it's just another tool. The ARC is one of many things that we do in our ecosystem, from an environmental assessment, but it's the same people around the clock. In some cases, we have 3 shifts that are working. And so the ability to be able to deploy these units at a moment's notice and respond accordingly, do a pre and a post if we had to respond to an incident where we felt that the room needed, I'm not going to say terminal cleaning, which is a medical term, but, a deep cleaning. We can do it. And they have the confidence and the ability to do that to where a staff now recommends, hey, let me get ahead of it. And then lastly, on the technology, because of who we are, it's our part of our DNA. That was another big part of that, because much like anything, we love the data, the digital stamp, the ability to audit, to have a dashboard. And it's not like, the eye in the sky that's keeping tabs on everybody, but it's another confirmation, as part of the theater. This is the ability to be able to look at something and say, yep, this has been done, it's been cycled, and almost like our mission control, we have the ability to have an operator, and those are the things we're looking at. Maybe we do pivot and have a very specific position that is managing this environment, and that's strictly what they do as we continue to grow into lofts and suites and into all the other public spaces. And now you have a detailed and thoughtful program with, that's backed by science, but also the technology that shows you that you are doing what you say you're doing.
Just one comment I'd like to make really quick, and then I want to ask Dr. Wade a question. So I think that in terms of reduced labor force, if you think about the chemical disinfectants, whether you're wiping or spraying, you need a full-time staff member to suit up in PPE and go around and wipe or spray. So in the environments when this does replace that action, it doesn't require full-time staff. So undoubtedly, it takes minutes of touch time. You have to have a tool that you move around and you plug it in, you press go. But when it's running, that staff member can be productive in other spaces. So it doesn't require a full-time operator. There's also no risk of that chemical interaction. And UVC is also entirely food safe. So you can use it in areas where folks are eating. But one thing I wanted to ask is, Dr. Wade, if you wouldn't mind just kind of breaking down for the group some of the various disinfection technologies. I think a lot of these folks are using sprayers, manual disinfection. Maybe they have bipolar ionization in their HVAC. If you wouldn't mind just kind of talking about, this is a layered approach and there is no silver bullet, and this is one tool you have. And in some environments, this is very elegant and effective and efficient, but it's important that everybody takes a holistic approach to their protocol.
Thank you, Eli. The technology that's been used most primitive is wipe and swipe. That you put a chemical on a rag and you wipe and the surface clean. That's been shown in studies to be about 50% effective. Those are studies even in trained staff in hospitals. They hit about 50% of the surfaces. It's about 50% reduction in pathogens. Now, we've advanced past then. With the COVID emergence, there's been new technologies, more focus on filtration. The problem with filtration is these viruses are so small that you have to have very effective filters. But when you do that, it really impacts the air ventilation systems. You've got to increase the flows. It's a very expensive way to disinfect with filtration. A couple other technologies are putting in chemical aerosolization, where you spray surfaces. There you've got a cost of the chemical, you've got a necessary of personal protective equipment for the applicator, and then the question is how effective you're using that and the time of residual, you're putting chemicals into the environment, and all those have implications. So that's why we think as a part of a tool, all those have places, all those have roles in disinfection. But in terms of simplicity, of cost effectiveness, of reduced manpower, and safety, we think the UV is a very effective way to go.
Well, before we run out of time, there's a queue has filled up with questions, which is awesome. And I want to make sure we get those addressed. So while I'm bringing that up and getting that organized, Eli, why don't you share with us? Yeah, this is a great place to end. Tell us about some of your other customers in the space, and not just in sports. Like, what other industries and contexts are using this technology?
Yeah, so we're on a pretty exciting growth trajectory. I think what we've built truly is disruptive and from a price performance standpoint. So we're actually our goal is to do good, and we want these in people's hands, and we want to democratize access to technology that's historically been inaccessible. So we actually have a subscription option. So you commit to 1, 2, or 3 years, and you pay monthly. And we actually fully maintain the device. We service it. We replace the bulbs. We offer the software. We have real-time customer support. So we're trying to make this very accessible. And because of that, we've gotten a lot of traction. So we are a young company. I'm not going to hide from that. We have extensive third-party testing. We're very well capitalized. We manufacture in the U.S. We're building 100 units a week right now. We've done now, I think, more than 300 schools, over a dozen professional sports teams. We're doing more than 10 million square feet of corporate offices. We're doing a lot of jails and prisons right now. That's a really big issue, a very high-risk environment. And then, of course, healthcare. There's a big precedence in that market, and we're able to really undercut the technologies that have been historically extorting the system. So we're getting some really good traction. We've done more than $6 million in the last 90 days. So like I said, we're building 100 units a week. We keep stock in both California and in Chicago, or outside Chicago. And we guarantee turnaround times of less than 10 days from receiving any order. And it's likely much faster than that.
And we're finding applications that we haven't even thought about, people coming out of the woodwork, such as pharmaceutical manufacturing, veterinary clinics, and different agricultural processes.
Yeah, everything from food processing to hospitality to sports to jails to schools to biologics labs. It's been pretty incredible.
Well, even though we're at time, if you and the audience are willing to stick with us, we're going to go past time and get all these questions answered. In no particular order, just as they're appearing to me. Dr. Wade, I think this might be a good candidate for you. The question comes from Brady. Thanks for the question, Brady. What are your thoughts on antibacterial products which start killing viruses and bacteria on contact? With so many high traffic areas and touch points, do you think fans would feel safer if railings, door handles, etc., were reinforced with a layer of such protection?
Yes, and again, that comes back to the layering of risk management. You start out with the chemicals, the high touch surfaces, that you've got high volumes, elevator buttons, handrails, going down to stadium seats. We're not saying UV is going to take over reducing that. It will reduce the risk, but it's not going to substitute for your manual cleaning you have in place. It's augmentation. So you can go from the 50% effective up to 80, 90% effective.
Dr. Wade, let's stick with you. A number of these are perfect for you to answer. As I understand UVC technology, it is an inactivation agent and only has claims to be effective on non-porous surfaces. Some chairs, what appears to be, I see some chairs and what appears to be a porous surface, must be referencing some of the photos. Mm-hmm. Is that validated, UVC on porous versus non-porous surfaces?
Yeah, UVC will kill any bacteria or inactivate viruses on any surface the light can contact. Now, if it's a shag rug with 2-inch pile, that's a different, I'd say equivocally, probably wouldn't be as effective. But if you've got a leather chair or a fabric chair, it will penetrate into the first few millimeters or a centimeter into that fabric. So it will be effective on those surfaces.
And Alex, one thing that we haven't had a chance to touch on that I really wanted to ask is, speaking to some of these finishings and the furniture and just the high level of detail, specifically in premium spaces, was there any level of concern that those spaces could be damaged by the light? And is that a valid concern, or is there no concern there?
Yeah, that was certainly one of my concerns. I'll let Dr. Wade and Eli answer the technical aspect, but we felt comfortable, that there's some slight assumed risk, but really at the end of the day, we're a people first organization and the importance of deploying it. But yeah, we didn't take that lightly. I mean, we make these massive investments to building out, multiple spaces. And I'm not in the business to be redesigning and doing any of the club spaces anytime soon. So, Eli, Dr. Wade, can you speak to the science on that? But it's over a long period of time. So.
Yeah, there's no evidence from the scientific literature that UV light will damage these surfaces. We know, however, a lot of the chemicals, they're either alcohol-based or hydroxyl-based, that you can have damage to surface with the chemicals with repeated use. But UV light, there's no evidence with routine use. And again, we're talking about real short durations. We're talking about 3 to 7 minutes, maybe once a day or once a week. So no evidence of any damage to content.
Eli, getting back to an audience question here, is this technology approved by the FDA and/or Health Canada as effective specifically against COVID-19?
I could speak to that. Dr. Wade's probably more eloquent than I am here. Dr. Wade, do you actually want to just jump in and take that one?
Yeah, this FDA doesn't approve any product. FDA will approve drugs and medical devices. This is not a medical device. This is not a drug. So they're not going to approve it. There are standards set for emissions. OSHA regulates how much UV light you can be exposed to safely. We don't even come close to that level because we say no human exposure. So it's not a health risk, but FDA is not going to approve or disapprove this device.
And Dr. Wade,
FDA, sorry, Jerry. I was just going to say that the FDA did publish here in February 1st a Q&A for those that are interested in their position on it. That was supportive of the technology. So I think it's a valid question, and great insight from Dr. Wade. So
absolutely. Well, clearly, Alex, you play in an indoor facility, and a large swath of the audience, I'm sure, plays an outdoor facility. So, Dr. Wade, how effective would a R0 ARC be for an outdoor venue? Is there any change in how effective the device is?
Well, we do disinfect air, but we're not disinfecting the planet. So I don't think it's going to be effective at treating outdoor facilities, but every outdoor facility has to have an egress point, and there has to be facilities around that. So your entryways, your elevators, your pathways, your restrooms, your concessions, all of those can be easily treated with the UV light.
Is it fair to say that areas like we've seen, locker rooms, suites, clubs, common spaces are the best use cases for this? Like, we're not going to be wheeling this down the steps of each level of the building to try to get to all of the seats. I want to make sure the audience is clear on that. Is that what we're dealing with here? I guess I myself need to understand.
Yeah, yes. We're talking about risk management. Risk management, we look at choke points of where people have points coming into the facility, going out of the facility, or using the facility. Those are the ones that we want to use the arc light and UV treatment, not the arena itself. The handrails going down, those are best done by wiping down, and the seats, but in the open space in the arena. But the choke points are where people congregate and use facilities. Those are the most effective points. Those are the places where transmission is occurring, by the way. It's not a transmission in big open aerated spaces. It's in choke points where people are coming together. For risk management, those are the places you want to treat.
Yeah, I think if you're treating the bathrooms in the places where people eat, you're covering the vast majority of the risk in a space. And that's where this solution is very elegant.
Eli, how many square feet does one machine cover? I think you briefly touched on this, but seeing it in the Q&A, I want to make sure that that's clear. How square foot per device, approximately how many devices would a venue need to lease from you?
Yeah, so square footage, it's a direct function. Cycle time is a function of square footage. So the larger the space, the longer you run it, but you can achieve the same efficacy. So that's how it works. So just as a rule of thumb, 500 square feet is about 3.5 minutes. 1,000 square feet would take less than 7 minutes. 3,500 square feet we do in about 14 minutes. And then if a space is larger than 3,500 square feet, I would just recommend it. It's just you could actually achieve disinfection faster if you kind of compartmentalize the space and run 2 cycles as opposed to one longer one. So you could run longer cycles to disinfect larger spaces, but it's faster just to run multiple shorter cycles.
Thanks for sticking with us. To the audience, we're just going to keep going. Keep the questions coming. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the panelists for being generous with your time. This is probably the most amount of questions we've ever received for an event like this, so this is exciting. What cleaning processes need to take place prior to the use of the R0 ARC? Obviously, organic matter would need to be removed prior to any disinfection, sterilization process. Does your IFU outline a cleaning process? Does anybody want to help Pat Quinn out with that question?
Yeah, I think I can maybe help a little bit on that. With either chemical or UV use, the surfaces have to be cleaned. So that's why we're saying this augments your existing janitorial cleaning services that you have. And this is a cost-effective way to augment and add on to it as opposed to in lieu of chemicals.
Another question here, specific to the Kings. How many of these, I assume these being an ARC unit, how many of these ARC units did the Kings need for all the spaces? How would you move the ARCs if they needed to be transported? So how many, Alex? And how do you move them around? And one thing I'll add to Chris's question here is, what do you do with them when they're not in use? How much storage space is needed?
Yeah, we currently have 2 with a projected growth to 5 based on need over time. And so we're, like I said, we have really found the ability to get some good coverage out of the 2 over 2 shifts with the strategic plan in place, as Eli had earlier mentioned, where it becomes intuitive and it's all self-programmed and there's some greater awareness. So we wanted to grow into this without, really just throwing everything at it. But we've leaned into it full staff. So 2 units, we either pull these around individually once they hit the floor. We'll get them into a certain location of the building on a cart system, that are safe and secure. They're really well balanced and not overly. They're easy to move around. I mean, it's easy as pushing a chair that's got wheels on it. And as far as space, it's no greater in circumference than that. So we have plenty of space to deploy these on, several levels if need be, stage them accordingly, which is ultimately the plan. And then you can move throughout the facility and reduce your travel time. But if we had to, like we said, we've already looked at the option of consolidating several units onto one platform and being able to just take these up and down throughout the facility as needed, and then deploy them as needed and move on to the next part of the building.
We can help you try to work through that. It really depends on the availability of your janitorial crew, how long the shift is, how many cases you want to try to treat. So we can work through that with you, and we're happy to help.
Eli, what is the turnaround time on purchase to getting it into the venue?
So we guarantee less than 10 days. We're building 100 units a week, and we try to always hold 300 units of stock. But so 10 days would be very conservative. It's probably much quicker depending on where you're located.
Understood. Dr. Quinn, I have another one here I think you're best suited for. A known concern with UVC technology in healthcare settings is shadowing, where certain places within a space are blocked by objects and don't allow the light to penetrate. Can you address that?
Yes, depending upon the geometry of the space and what is in there, such as an operating room, sometimes they'll put 2 positions. They'll run 2 short cycles of 3 minutes each. So in some of the locker rooms, we recommend maybe 2 different short bursts, depending upon where the facilities are located, equipment, materials are located. But again, we're looking at contact surfaces. Yes, you're going to have some shadowing. If the couch is against the wall, the UV light will not penetrate the back of that couch, but that's not a contact surface. And these viruses don't last more than a couple days, from hours to days on surfaces, even if you don't do anything. So we're looking at high contact surfaces, short-term exposures. You can also get shadowing that you get reflectance of the UV light off walls, ceilings, depending upon what material is made in those rooms. So you do get some efficacy, but if it's a backside of a cabinet or backside of a couch, no, you're not going to treat it. But those aren't areas you clean with chemicals either.
These last few may be a little bit repetitive, but Dr. Wade, how long is the effectiveness once an area is treated with the UVC device?
Yeah, using the ARC system, you will remove all the virus, particularly COVID in this case, but also it's important to understand this is equally effective of influenza, cold, rhinoviruses, MRSA, any other pathogens that happen to be there in the future or currently. It'll take all those bacteria and virus out of the air and on the surfaces down to the 99.99% effective. Now, if you have somebody coming in and they start coughing and hacking and spreading viruses, then you can recontaminate the surface. That's true no matter what kind of decontamination service you provide. And that's why, you know, we and other companies have also technology to looking at air treatment.
Well, gentlemen, I think we were able to burn through all of those. Thanks for sticking on the line with us today. This is exciting because we're talking about solutions to problems. One more coming in here. I guess we didn't do a good enough job of addressing costs. Eli, can you get into what type of model you have? You're not necessarily selling. It's sort of a lease subscription model. I'm taking the words out of your mouth, but can you address the business model and the relationship you have with your clients?
Essentially, it's a lease, but we like to say subscription. I think it sounds sexier, and it's a little bit broader. So yeah, the minimum commitment is 1 year. We'll do 1, 2, and 3 years. It's paid monthly. Like I said, we service it entirely. We'll replace bulbs, all customer support, all software, all maintenance. It's under warranty the entire duration. And that also includes we have a small upfront delivery fee, and so for a 1 year lease, you're looking at the ballpark of around $30 a day, and then all down to if you commit up to 3 years, closer to about $17 a day. So we hope that's digestible. And like I said, with volume, we can be flexible. So we'll work with you guys, and we want to make this work. So please do reach out, and we'll make it work.
Yeah, thanks, Eli. So we're going to keep talking about this. Please plan to join me again next week. We'll have another webinar next week, Wednesday, February 17th. And we're going to keep talking about solutions to bring all of our constituents back into our building safely. That registration email should start to arrive in your inboxes tomorrow morning. But as we close this session here today, please, if you would, each of the panelists, if you're comfortable sharing some contact information, how can those in the audience reach out to you to continue this conversation after today? Because clearly there's a lot of interest and questions. Eli, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so my personal email is eli@r0systems.com. If you have sales-related inquiries, sales@r0systems.com. Or just general information, info@r0systems.com. On our website, we have pretty robust information and a contact form, and that's just r0.com.
Dr. Wade, what's the best way for someone in the audience to ask a follow-up question today?
It's Dr. Dr. Wade at r0systems.com.
And Alex, I know you're talking to a number of the folks in the audience already, and this is a family, as we've alluded to a couple of times today, but how can someone reach out to you with questions?
I just typed it in, Rodrigo@kings.com. Yeah, and by all means, if Jared, feel free to share my information with the community. Happy to discuss this at greater length and in greater detail. So,
Alex, Eli, Dr. Wade, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Thank you to the audience for your participation. That's always exciting for us when we're creating this type of content. But we are going to have to leave it there for today. Thanks for your attendance, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.